What are websites made up of? Is it an egg? Maybe fried chicken? Maybe rice? You might be a little bit hungry. Or is it actually code? Well, I think you probably understand that websites are made out of code. And the thing is that there's three things that websites are made up of: HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So just to summarize HTML, CSS, JavaScript, HTML is the skeleton of the website, CSS is the makeup, and JavaScript is the brain. So let's get started with the first one, which is HTML. So HTML itself is basically the skeleton of the website. Let's look into what each individual letter represents. So H stands for hyper, T stands for text, M stands for markup, and L stands for language. So HTML stands for hypertext markup language. So let's begin with the first two words, which is essentially actually just one word, which is hypertext. Hypertext is essentially hyperlink plus text. So what is this hyperlink text? Well, essentially, if you were to go to a simple website like sigmaschool.co, then you'll probably be shown a website. So this website itself is basically showing us that, hey, want to check our cool swag at sig1.co/swag. Then if I were to click on this link or hyperlink, which is essentially in a text, then what it does is that it will redirect us to a website that is sig1.co/swag, and then it will show us a new website where it will say, welcome to Sigma Swag. So this is essentially what hyperlink text is. It's helping us to link to other websites. That makes HTML very, very powerful. So now we know what's hyper and text. What about markup? So markup essentially is in a way helping you to style different parts of your website into something. For example, in this normal text, it becomes very big. So markup is essentially a way for us to have a normal text that will be shown inside the website and essentially tag it to be a different kind of text. And this kind of text is not a normal text. It is, we call it a heading 1 text. So essentially inside your website, it will look something like this, where your code is just normal text. With markup, we essentially can add this H1 and this H1, which is essentially what I mentioned earlier, which is heading 1. And with this, it transforms our simple text inside our website to a heading 1, and it will look something like this. So H1 is essentially heading 1, which, if you want to know, it is usually the most important text in your website and usually the first thing that you see in the website. So another property of markup is essentially creating structure. So what do I mean by structure? So example, you might have a blog that you want to share about how to be a good programmer. So your website will look something like this, where you say one tip to become a programmer, and it's published in 12 June 2024. And then you have another blog post that says this programmer said this ... and it's published in 11 June 2024. And the code is pretty simple. So the thing is, to add structure to our HTML code, we can add a markup, which is essentially this B tag, which represents bold. So now we bold our title and it will look something like this in our website over here. So now you could see that adding markup in our website actually helps it look structured for someone who were to visit your website. And now we know what markup is. Lastly, we want to know what language is. And essentially, to just summarize it, it's using words to describe something. There you go. That's what language is. So to summarize hypertext markup language, it is essentially to create and structure content, which essentially are text or even images on the web, and also links as well. So that is what hypertext markup language is. So now we know what HTML or hypertext markup language. The next thing is CSS. So CSS is essentially cascading style sheet. So let's get started with cascading. So cascading essentially means that it flows down. So cascading, right? So for example, we have this button over here, and this button essentially has a H1 text inside it that is called join now. So the CSS actually will look something like this. So we have a color that is white, and essentially the style of our white color. So another thing about CSS is that color doesn't represent the button. Color represents the font color. So essentially what it does is that this button will essentially have the style being passed to our button HTML over here. And the button itself don't really have text, so we add a text that is in H1. So with this, we actually add a font of white inside our H1, and that's why the join now is white inside our button. What if we want to change our color from white to yellow? So essentially what this does is that, imagine the style is essentially in this yellow ball, and then it will pass through the button, and then it will pass through our H1. So you can see that the style actually cascade down or flow down into our HTML tag, into our HTML code, and then now our join now text will transform into yellow color font. And since in the code it has this yellow style over here, then inside our website it will look something like this, where the join now is essentially yellow in color. The thing is that we can also add a style for our H1, which is essentially what it looks like over here. So the style is basically saying our font color will be white color, and this is represented in this ball over here. So it goes to directly to the H1 or heading 1 text, and then it will transform the yellow join now color to the white color, and now you can see our button also changed into the white color as well. So you can see the logic that even though the button says color yellow, the H1 color property white essentially override the button because it is closest to what we have over here. So H1 will always be white even though the button font color style property is yellow. So cascading is basically the logic of how we determine the style of the website. So you will learn more when you are learning CSS. Now you know a little bit about cascading. Style is essentially, next thing is what is style, but style is essentially how you control the look of the website, and sheet is basically you can create this style in another file. So now you know cascading style sheet is essentially describing the website look through the colors, fonts and more through the CSS logic or the cascading logic. And now we know CSS. Lastly, we want to know JavaScript. And JavaScript essentially is the brain of the website. So for example, if I were to go to a website like sigmaschool.co, then you click on this join now button. Essentially, you'll probably have a pop-up that says join now with your full name and email, and then in the submit button over here. This interactivity is essentially what JavaScript is, and JavaScript is essentially a way for you to control the interactivity of the website. Whether you click on a button, something happens, or when you were to move your mouse, then animation happens. That is mainly through JavaScript. So essentially, to summarize what is HTML, CSS and JavaScript, HTML in one word is the structure of the website, CSS the look of the website, and JavaScript is the interactivity of the website. And that is HTML, CSS and JavaScript.